Hello, this and my other YouTube videos are extracted from the History of Man series, currently 6 books published in print, ebook, and most importantly, audiobook. I'm a storyteller, and if you like these video stories, you'll love the History of Man series audiobooks. Great for commuting or just sitting back and relaxing. And unlike a novel you've read where you know the ending, you can listen to these books on tape more than once. There's so much to learn. Available on Amazon and audible.com, I narrate the audiobooks. And the best part about that is you can listen to these stories without having to look at my stupid face. And with that said, let's get the show on the road. Hello, I'm John Bershoff, another installment of History of Man series, because I'm a storyteller, and this one is How to Wipe Out a Culture with a Sneeze, Part 2. In the previous story, we talked about the Age of Discovery and why it was necessary for sailors to sail into the setting sun looking for the Far East. Why? Because they wanted to get the coveted spices and the silk out of China and the Far East into Europe, who craved those things. And the Ottoman Empire had blocked the traditional Silk Road that had run for 2,000 years or so. But anyway, when these sailors set sail, those that went around the tip of South Africa, which when they first went around it was called the Cape of Storms, but sailors were reluctant to sail through a Cape of Storms, so it was later changed to the name of the Cape of Good Hope. Vasco da Gama made it all the way to India. Diaz was the first to go through that cape. But the ones that sailed into the setting sun looking for a westward route discovered the New World. And what they brought with them was not pleasant. Besides their bayonets and muskets, they brought infections. Columbus brought the flu to the islands in the Caribbean that he landed on. Ponce de Leon also landed on similar islands we would call Cuba. He also landed on the Yucatan Peninsula and eventually made it into the Mayan civilization. And he brought smallpox, which was the worst of all of them, and it pretty much wiped out a good deal of the Mayan population. They had no immunity to these infections. And if these people who were enslaved in these countries, if they didn't die from assault, from a bayonet, or from a musket, or from starvation, they died from infection. And those infections were pretty amazing. Now, of course, there were the stories of the Aztec gold that eventually percolated into the sailors. There was no gold in the Caribbean. They dug, but they couldn't find any. But they figured there was gold in the Aztec civilization of Central America. So such sailors as Cortez and Balboa conquered the Aztec Empire, and they brought smallpox. Whereas measles decimated the Mayans, smallpox decimated the Aztecs. It made the business of conquering these people, these civilizations that had been there for 10, 20,000 years, easy piecework. Even in South America, when Pizarro in around 1532 went in and conquered the Incas, they had already been weakened. They were weakened because two brothers were in a civil war with each other, trying to lay claim to their father's empire, to the Inca Empire. So that had already weakened the Incas. And then in came an infection that Pizarro's people brought, measles, and that further weakened the Incas, making the business of Pizarro conquering Peru and the Incas that much easier. Now, the European colonization of North America, we've talked about Central, the Caribbean, South America, but North America That was mostly Britain, France in the east, and Canada, and Spain out in west, what we would call like California and Texas. And they also brought a bad disease, smallpox. It swept through the Cherokee in Georgia and Florida. It decimated the Plains Indians, the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, the Comanche, Crow, Lakota, Sioux. So all of these infections weakened these tribes and killed so many of them that, again, the business of conquering them was made easy due to microscopic diseases. Infections like the flu, measles, cholera, mumps, whooping cough, a watered down version of the plague, would wipe out all these indigenous North American wonderful tribes that had been there for 20,000 years. Now, the plague, we'll talk about another one called the Great Plague or the Black Death. But a plague just means any type of infection. But anyway, if you look at the estimates or the pre-Columbian, which means pre-Columbus estimates of the population of all the Americas, from Alaska and Canada down through North America, through Central America and South America, at the time before Columbus set sail in 1492, it was estimated that there were 100 million indigenous people living in this new world. After the European colonization of the Americas was complete, after the last sword swung, the last musket ball shot in the 1700s, when it came to a close, maybe 5 million indigenous people survived out of 100 million. That's 95% of the New World indigenous population was killed, mostly by infection, and of course some by starvation, and others, unfortunately, by bayonets and musket balls. I hope you enjoyed this version of how to wipe out a culture with just a sneeze. We'll have other similar videos for you to watch. These stories are in my books. This is the First History of Man. It's 6 books that are out now in print, Kindle, an audiobook, which I do the narration. And I promise you, every page you turn, you'll learn something. It's a style of writing called jumping off, where you have a baseline, and in my case, it's medicine and science, and I jump off into other stories. I always come back and complete it. So sometimes when people read, they think, what's he talking about? But eventually they see how I get back on track. It's intentional style of writing. I hope you have a good day. Thank you for listening, and be well.